known as the four Brahma Viharas, which is, I think, a Sanskrit term. Translated into the divine abodes. It's actually a formulation that precedes Buddhism. From the Brahmanic religions of South Asia, Brahma being the divine one. So Brahma Viharas is the divine abodes. Viharas, the abode, the abiding place. So it's translated as the four divine abodes. And those four are loving kindness, sympathetic joy, compassion, and equanimity. They're considered to be four faces of the divine, four faces of Brahma. There were statues of Brahma with four different faces. You can see everything. In this case, these are actually four facets of the heart of the divine, four expressions of unselfish love. Sometimes called immeasurables, because there's no limit to the goodness that arises from our practice of loving kindness, sympathetic joy, compassion, and equanimity. So compassion is identifying with the suffering of others and sincerely wishing to alleviate it. Loving kindness is active goodwill towards all, wishing everyone to be happy. Sympathetic joy is happiness at the joy of others, even if we don't experience, or we're not in possession of the experience that they're having, that we might lack what they're joyful about. And equanimity is even-mindedness, serenity, treating everyone equally in all kinds of different circumstances. In the Genjo koan, Dogen Zenji, the founder of Soto Zen in Japan, 1200s, teaches us that to study the Buddha way is to study the self. And to study the self is to forget the self. Forgetting the self, losing the grip of self-preoccupation, is important for practicing the four immeasurables, because these are four aspects of unselfish love. It's not love for self-gain. It's love for, the sake of others. So this essential practice of studying the self and forgetting the self is based in Zazen. Where our practice is to really settle our bodies right here, settle our attention, our awareness, concentrate very deeply on our breath or our sound or our koan, our body awarenesses. Sitting right here now, our eyes open. Zazen is an open-eyed activity, directly experiencing these sensations at each moment. Letting go of thought, but then inevitably thoughts arise. thoughts arise. Memories, plans, images arise. All of those, all of those pieces of the puzzle of ourself, get put together, assembled over the decades of our lives. They come up. Our personal self is, mosaic or collage of all of our experiences and our memories, our hurts and our defenses, our traumas, our lack, our people that criticized us, armoring our little baby self that was there when we were a year old, and now here we are, decades old. We have all these habits, defenses, beliefs, narratives, stories. It's in Zazen and it's active all day long, every day. We have self, we're people, right? But we also have a vow to awaken. That's what we're doing here, we want to awaken not only for ourselves, but for others. For our friends, our families, our loved ones, for everyone we encounter, for our pets, our parents, our students, our, postal delivery person, our gas station attendant, everybody, our politicians. So in Zazen we practice seeing the arising of our habits, our minds, our feelings, our thoughts, and we practice knowing them. We don't want to just brush them off. We don't just want to bypass our feelings, pretend like we're holy and we don't have feelings of fear or guilt or desire or anger. No, we want to face those the reality of who we are, what we are. Our programming, our loops, our belief systems, our defenses, and look at the root of all that. And know it. Know the roots, Know why we have these defenses. It's a way to protect us, It's our unconscious trying to protect us and get us through life without harm, with some happiness, with some fulfillment. But we practice letting them go. And often, given the truth of suffering, which was Buddha's first noble truth, the truth of suffering. Realizing the truth of suffering doesn't mean that we're never going to suffer again. We're never going to be hungry or cold or afraid or alone. That's not life. But anyway, it's often difficult feelings that arise in Zazen and in life. And yet we need to face those things. We need to know ourselves. Why we do what we do. What choices that we make. Inner critic, making us feel not good enough. We need to let those things go. We need to know them and let them go. It's like the Buddha decided to sit under this Bodhi tree, his tree, fig tree, and not get up till his answers to his questions about suffering and liberation came. And while he was sitting under the tree, Mara, the demon, came at him with, armies of demonic warriors shooting flaming arrows at the Buddha and spears and things, and then that didn't shake the Buddha off, and then he sent, palaces. And here, if you just follow me, you can have all the wealth in the world. This is a metaphor for his own patterns, his own emotional habits, fears, desires, memories. But he was skillful enough to know those and to let them go. And he said, Mara, I know you. This is in his story. You know, time and again, Mara, I know you. And then Mara went away. So, you know, with practice, these habitual habits and feelings that arise on our cushion, and we can know that in zazen, and it can carry over to our daily life. You know, the feelings we have in our encounters. Or if we're just sitting there daydreaming and we get all involved in some drama, you know, where does that come from? We can let that go and return to the present moment awareness on the cushion and off the cushion. And these four immeasurable aspects of unselfish love, I mean, when we have the space not being dragged around by our preoccupations and our habits, there's some space we can have for noticing, you know, these immeasurables that actually do come up in our lives. And actually they can be cultivated with practice, with meditating on them, with, you know, metta practices and similar ways of sending it out. And cultivating these responses to life can be very wholesome and beneficial ways to, you know, reduce conflict and separation, sense of separation in our lives, you know, increase the understanding and the harmony in our relationships, in our sangha, and it benefits ourselves and others. Okay? So for example, you know, if we were with a young child, like maybe a toddler, or maybe a puppy, you know, we can feel loving kindness easily, you know, for this sweet, little, innocent, warm, cuddly being, you know, a kid or a puppy or a kitty, for kitty lovers out there. You know, we can feel this loving kindness towards them, right? And we're willing to take care of it, and we wish it happiness, right? And if the child or the pet, the puppy or the kitty is, you know, playing, frolicking, running around, you know, we can feel sympathetic joy. Look, the puppy's happy, the cat's having fun, and, you know, I'm happy for the puppy or the child. You know, the child is innocent, having fun, living, exploring, learning, you know. You know, and then they might bump themselves or fall down or scratch themselves or something, and, you know, they're sad and they're hurt, you know. We feel compassion for them. We don't want them to suffer. We want to, you know, their suffering to end, you know. We're going to help them feel better. And then we also may see that our own stability, you know, our own groundedness, our own, you know, maturity allows us to give them love in a steady way, despite the vicissitudes that they experience, maybe even despite our own vicissitudes. I mean, you know, we may have other responsibilities and not just want to play with the kid or the kitty all day, but, you know, we have some equanimity. We want to do what we can for them. You know, beyond children and puppies and kitties, there's a chance, you know, possibility of practicing it in our lives with our adult friends, you know, our colleagues, our family, our sangha members. And, you know, if we notice it, I just know that there's times when these feelings of kindness and care come up like unbidden. So if you're feeling relaxed, you're not totally stressed out and anxious, there's some space there for you to feel some loving kindness for people, or your friend or family member has had something good happen to them, and you're happy for them. You're glad that they got that job or found a partner, or had a lovely walk on the beach or anything. We can apply all those immeasurables, to our daily life, and yet we don't not want to neglect our own needs. We have our own needs. We can just stop preparing food, stop paying the bills, stop there's things we have to do. But other times there are other times that we can practice these aspects of unselfish love, right? And we can give equanimity, compassion, and loving kindness to others, our close family and friends, and other circumstances to other people that we encounter as well. So on the one hand, some loosening of our self-preoccupation, it's necessary to make some emotional space for recognizing these aspects of our loving heart that come up, and start doing practice with them, and conscious practice, meditating on them and practicing them, like metta practice. On the other hand, the practice with them further loosens up that grip on our own, of our habits, to control our lives. And it helps reduce, habitual thoughts and feelings like ill will or anger, resentment, or fear, distress, envy, comparison. All those feelings that cause discomfort and cause suffering. We can loosen that up. So each weekday morning here, Monday to Friday, after our meditation period, we have a service, and we sing the song of loving kindness every morning. May you dwell in the heart. May you be free from suffering. May you be healed. May you be at peace. Every morning we sing that, and every Thursday evening after Daisan, group Sanzen, group interview with the teacher, the Metta Sutra is chanted. The Metta Sutra, and it includes radiating kindness over the entire world. So it's a practice. It's a practice that's part of the Zen Center cycle of offerings, right? And as with metta practice, in which we start with expressing loving kindness for ourselves, and then our loved ones, and then other friends or sangha members or neighbors or the community, and eventually expressing it to those who are indifferent or hostile. It's a phrase from the Metta Sutta. Indifferent or hostile. And we can do that not only with loving kindness, we can do that with compassion. Sending compassion, sympathy for the suffering, a wish that their suffering be relieved. We can sense, we can express sympathetic joy, happiness at their happiness. Even though we may not have that experience that they do. And equanimity, caring for them under varying circumstances. express for ourselves, our loved ones, our neighbors, our sangha, our whole communities, and even those who are indifferent or hostile, and radiating all those four immeasurables, out over the entire world. That's a practice that's possible for us. Heart practice. Developing heart compassion. Cultivating compassion as well as wisdom. I mean, for a long time I was really focused on wisdom, studying the books and reading the sutras and trying to find out what's the meaning of, the Dharma teachings and stuff. But, there's the other, here's Manjushri, Bodhisattva, wisdom over here, but then there's this other Bodhisattva, right? Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva of compassion, of, unselfish love, of these four immeasurables. It's half of the whole world of Buddhism is compassion, maybe more than half of it. A couple of weeks ago, there was a protest down in front of the county courthouse in Corvallis called Witnessing in Silence, and it was organized by Buddhists Responding Corvallis. And some of us attended that. There were only 2 signs in this protest, placed, 50 or 100 feet apart out on the sidewalk. And there was only 3 words on the 2 signs, but they both had the same words. Wisdom, compassion, and action. And that's the message that the passersby saw from these silent witnesses. Okay. In the context of my talk this evening, the wisdom part is seeing into the self. Knowing the self, knowing one's habitual reactivities and habits and patterns, and being able to see through them, right? To be with just what's happening right now, the present experience, the feeling, the sound, the companions. And wisdom is knowing the truth of impermanence, interdependence, and no self. That's a wisdom dimension of our practice. Impermanence. Interdependence means none of us got to where we are all by ourselves. And Buddha said one of the 3 marks of existence is no self. And what does that mean? It's something that I can talk about, but everybody has got to look into their own experience and look into the truth of that for themselves. That's what the Buddha said. Don't believe what I say. Look into it for yourself. And the compassion part of wisdom and compassion in the context of this talk is compassion represents this gateway into all 4 of the immeasurables. It's a gateway into the heart of unselfish love that takes, in this formulation, sort of 4 configurations, but it could be multiple combinations. There could be 16 or 64 different ways of saying unselfish love in all these different circumstances. Regarding action, this is getting back to the protest, right? Regarding action, it's a little bit of a sidetrack from the immeasurables, but they fit in. Dogen Zenji says in the Shobogenzo, the Bodhisattva's 4 methods of guidance. It's one of the 96 6 fascicles of the Shobogenzo. He says, beneficial action, that's the phrase, beneficial action is skillfully to benefit all classes of sentient beings. That is, to care about their distant and near future, and to help them by using skillful means. Beneficial action is an action of oneness, benefiting self and others alike. Thus, benefit friend and enemy equally. Benefit self and others alike. If you have this heart, even beneficial action for the sake of grasses, trees, wind, and water is spontaneous and unremitting. Compassion, loving kindness, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, they all support beneficial action, ethical action. That's the action that was on those protest signs. Dogen Zenji writes in one of his essays called Bandawa that Zazen is a Dharma gate of ease and joy. This practice that we do, half an hour at a time, a couple of times every offering, it's the Dharma gate of ease and joy. And one aspect of this ease is equanimity. Settled, stable, present moment awareness, not buffeted around by our urges and emotions and memories, just settled, stable, open, relaxed, alert, present moment awareness. And one aspect of this joy that I believe that Dogen was talking about is appreciation of the continuous creative emergence of everything in our world. It's happening right now. All of this is emerging. Right now, right? Every moment. Moment after moment. And it's a fascinating and amazing experience for us to be immersed in. Continuous emergence of life. And I think there's sympathetic joy to be had in that. There was a biologist named E.O. Wilson, and he defined the term biophilia as an, quote, innate and genetically determined affinity of human beings with the natural world. The Greek roots of the word biophilia can mean love of life. Biophilia, love of life. Love of trees and birds, fish and frogs, butterflies, cats and dogs, trees, rivers, clouds, the whole natural world, And I would say finding joy in nature, Out of nature it comes to me, It's just beautiful and gives me joy, Everything's connected in the world of biological systems, biodiversity, and constantly changing. Impermanent, I think everything's dying. We're all dying right now. But life is continuously emerging. And Dogen's joy in Zazen, this ease and joy, it's not limited to the natural world though, because he didn't just live out in the forest, he lived in a monastery. We don't just live in the forest, we live in these buildings. This joy is not limited to the natural world. It also includes our human companions right here. We're not animals and stuff. We're being with our friends right now, and also inanimate objects. Dogen was such a brilliant person, you know. He felt that inanimate objects, or he called them insentient beings, and he said they were always proclaiming the Dharma. Insentient beings proclaiming the Dharma. That's the title of another one of his fascicles from the Showa-Ginzo. Tiles, stones, walls, proclaiming the Dharma. No? Proclaiming, the Dharma of interdependence and impermanence. As a focus of sympathetic joy, moment after moment. Everything's falling apart, but at the same time, everything's coming together right now. It's amazing. So the four immeasurables, the divine abodes, or the Brahma Viharas, they can be cultivated through regular practice, just as we practice with metta. And this can help lessen one's unwholesome habits of desire, fear, and delusion, and self-preoccupation. And it can contribute to harmony and closeness